Pilgrim Steve Hopkins was Bill Gardner's ninth great-grandfather. Steve Hopkins, he worked as a tanner and a merchant. But early in 1609, we find Stephen began employment as a minister's clerk, and he was reading religious works to a congregation, including members of the Virginia Company. Then on June 1609, Steve Hopkins, left his wife and his family, and he went with this Virginia Company to depart for Jamestown. Now, Sir Thomas Gates was appointed by the Virginia Company of London to be the new governor of Virginia, which the Company of London was those who established the Jamestown settlement under a royal charter for the colonization of Virginia. So Gates sailed for Jamestown, along with Stephen Hopkins and hundreds of others, within this 7 fleet ships, one being including the new flagship for the Virginia Company called the Sea Venture. They were also towing 2 Pinnacles, which was intended to deliver new settlers and desperate needed supplies. At the sea, the ships of the third supply were separated by a 3-day storm now thought to be a large hurricane. The admiral, Sir George Somers, has taken helm to fight the storm and deliberately drove the ship onto the rocks, preventing its foundering. The rocks proved to be the reef line to the east of the inhabited Bermuda. The other ships went to Jamestown, not knowing what the fate was of the Sea Venture. So the admiral and the governor and approximately 150 other people on the Sea Venture departed the other 6 ships, and the other 6 ships went on to Jamestown, and these guys were on Bermuda. The 150 survivors spent the next 10 months in Bermuda and spent most of the time building 2 new ships, which was to complete the journey to Jamestown. At the beginning, they sent a longship with the mast of the Bermuda with 8 men, but they were never heard of again. While they were in Bermuda, there was contention on who was to be charged. Admiral Somers was in charge during the voyage, for he was the admiral of the voyage. However, Thomas Gates felt like since he was appointed governor of Virginia that he should be in charge. So there was contention there. Not only was that, Stephen Hopkins, who had remained faithful to Governor Gates, after some time was voicing dissatisfaction along with other men. And the dissatisfaction was, hey, their indenturement was based on them getting to Virginia safely. Since they didn't, and now they're in Bermuda, they should be able to decide what they want to do. Many wanted to go on to Jamestown, while others, mainly the leaders, felt that Bermuda was a great place to live because the weather was good, plenty of food, and so forth. So Hopkins, being quite vocal, was arrested and charged with mutiny and was found guilty, for which he was sentenced for death. Many of the people with him and Stephen Hopkins begged for mercy on him and for a pardon, and he did receive the pardon. And from that point, Stephen Hopkins no longer was setting his voice to controversial issues. Interesting enough is this wreck of the Sea Venture reached England, and most scholars believe that the William Shakespeare play was based on play called The Tempest was based on the report of this shipwreck. It was first performed in November of 1611. The play depicts the experience of a group of passengers being shipwrecked by a mighty storm. A subplot involves a comic character called Stefano who tries to take over as leader on the island. It is very possible that Stefano, or many of the scholars believe that Stefano, was based on Stephen Hopkins. Okay, they were able to build their 2 ships, and so they headed towards Jamestown. Now, in Jamestown was much different than what you saw in Plymouth or in Massachusetts. The English there were composed of titled leaders who were charged often over inexperienced settlers, as well as soldiers who were veterans of European wars, such as Captain John Smith. And all those at Jamestown were focused on returning profit to their London investors and were under great stress when no gold or minerals or anything else of much value to London was found in the Chesapeake area. Whereas those that were the pilgrims that went to Massachusetts were leaving for religious freedom and planned on settling there. These were here working in Jamestown, creating a profit for their owners so that they can return back and go back to England. The colonists there in Virginia or Jamestown could not or would not farm. They tried to barter for food with the natives, and when that didn't work, they stole food from them, leading to much violence, and which continued for many years. On May 10, 1610, the two newly constructed boats, made from pretty much the wreckage that they had from the shipwreck in Bermuda of the Sea Venture, departed Bermuda with all on board and arrived in Jamestown 11 days later. What they found there was that the colonists in Jamestown were starving to death due to their inability, and in some cases unwillingness, to produce food. The Jamestown people were afraid to go outside their fort, so they were tearing down their houses for firewood. They were not planting crops, nor trading with the natives, or catching fish. Much of this had to do with some of the settlers feeling it was beneath their dignity to work, and the violent abuse they gave the native people, which caused much enmity between the natives and the English. At his arrival in Bermuda, Governor Gates estimated there was only a day's worth of food left and decided to take the whole people from Jamestown back to England. There were 61 people left from the 500 that were in Jamestown at wintertime, which was, so the time from the winter to the 61 left began to known as the starving time. Just as they were preparing to depart, an English ship came into the harbor with supplies and new settlers, along with a new governor. Of course, they probably didn't know that the previous governor was stranded in Bermuda and was alive. With the new governor called Lord de la Warr, the colonists were forced to return and reestablish their fort, albeit reluctantly. While Stephen was in Jamestown, and Stephen remained in Jamestown for 4 years, his wife Mary had survived by being a shopkeeper as well as receiving some of Stephen's wages. But she unexpectedly died in May of 1613, leaving 3 young children. By 1614, a letter arrived for Hopkins in Jamestown, and it is presumed that this is how he learned of her death. And after that, and so he did return to England soon afterward to care for his children. So during the 4 years that Steve Hopkins was in Jamestown, he left in 1614. So a year before he left, in April, Captain Samuel Argall kidnapped Pocahontas. Governor Gates was fearful of a reprisal from the chief Powhatan, and turned the Algonquin princess over to Dale and Henricus. She met John Wolfe during her captivity. Pocahontas met John Wolfe, and 3 months later she became his wife. Reverend Alexander Whitaker converted Pocahontas to Christianity, and she adopted the name Rebecca. Pocahontas and John, her husband, went to England in June of 1616. So a lot happened in Steve Hopkins' life. Once Steve Hopkins got back into England, he and his family, consisting of his wife, Elizabeth, and his children, Constance, Giles, and Demarius, as well as 2 servants, Edward Doughty and Edward Lester, they all departed from Plymouth, England on the Mayflower, 16th of September, 1620. The Mayflower was a small 100-foot ship with 102 passengers and about 30 to 40, a crew of 30 to 40, and they were in extremely cramped conditions. By the 2nd month out, the ship was being buffeted by strong westerly gales, causing the ship's timbers to be badly shaken, and with the caulking failing to keep out seawater, and with passengers, even in their berths, lying wet and ill. This, combined with the lack of proper rations and unsanitary conditions for several months, is attributed what would be fatal for many, especially the majority of the women and children. On the way there, they lost two members as crossing the sea, a crew member and a passenger. But the worst was yet to come. After they arrived at their destination, over a period of several months, almost half the passengers perished in the cold, harsh, unfamiliar New England winter. On November 21st, 1620, the Mayflower Compact was signed, and that was the passengers of the Mayflower argued, as the passengers of St. Ventura had argued, that they had been freed from their indentures to the Virginia Company and could now choose their own governments. Stephen Hopkins was among the ones to sign. Now, when they came to the bay, Steve Hopkins was a member of the early Mayflower exploratory parties in the Cape Cod area. He was well versed in hunting. His general lifestyle, he was very versed in the general lifestyle of the Native Americans from his years in Jamestown, and which was later found to be quite useful to the Pilgrim leadership. The first formal meeting with the natives was held in Hopkins' house, and he was called upon to participate in early Pilgrim visits with the natives' leader, Massasoit. Over the years, Hopkins' assistants to Pilgrim's leaders such as Miles Standish and Edward Winslow regarding his knowledge of the local languages was found to be quite useful. So, although he did make it to Jamestown through a shipwreck, that 4 years there was very critical to his return ship of the Mayflower and the help of Pilgrims making it in Massachusetts during a cold winter.